Yeah, it's wonderful to be with the Legion tonight. I always feel inadequate speaking to legionaries because you're the real missionaries out there. The rest of us sit in the shires quietly looking at the great work you're doing in the forefront. But tonight, brothers and sisters, I just want to speak to you about the importance of believing in Mary as our mother of supernatural grace. Mary is the mother of supernatural grace. Over these last 15 weeks, with the close down, the lockdown, our church has been closed. People not receiving the sacraments. It has really made me wonder, have we lost a sense of the importance of the supernatural life? In my day life, I suppose, I teach in our Dominican studium in Dublin. And one of the courses I teach is on grace. And over the years, I've become more and more concerned. I think the greatest theological argument of the 20th century has been a loss of the supernatural. What's the connection between this natural life and the supernatural life? Now, I don't want to get into a whole debate between the Jesuits and the Dominicans, but I could if you want me to. But I do think throughout the 20th century, this distinction, no, not the separation, this distinction between the natural life and the supernatural life has become very hazy. And I just wonder, our response to this coronavirus, our willingness to close our churches and to stop the sacraments being given to people, if we really believed that the sacraments are the means of supernatural life being given to the soul, I doubt we would have been as enthusiastic to close our churches and to stop the reception of the sacraments. For me, and I think we need to think about this seriously, the redemption is something new. When God entered into our world in the womb of the Blessed Virgin, and we heard tonight of the importance of Mary's yes, and that yes resounds through the whole of creation, something different and new happened. God's life entered into our world in the womb of the Blessed Virgin. And the supernatural life of God became a reality in the womb of the Blessed Virgin. That supernatural life, we know, comes through the sacraments. Now, we know also from St. Thomas Aquinas that God is not bound by the sacraments. He can do all sorts of things. But the only sure way we know that that supernatural life of grace can begin and grow is through the sacraments. And the Catholic Church's main job is to be the sacrament of salvation and redemption, and to make available to the world the sacraments. And my reading of Frank Duff and his inspiration for the Legion 100 years ago was that he wanted you, the laity, to go forth as cooperators with us clergy to bring people back to the sacraments. Not just back to a sort of a nice, happy get-together friendship, but to bring us back to the sacraments, to receive the sacraments, to receive the sacramental, the supernatural life of grace. And I think if we really saw the distinction, not the separation, between the the natural and supernatural, I think what we talked about earlier, where's the zeal gone? I think for a lot of people, we wonder, so what happens? Who cares if the child is baptized or not? Who cares if I go to Holy Communion or not? Who cares if I go to Mass or not? What difference does it make if my marriage is blessed as a sacrament or not? What difference does it make if I receive Mass when my soul is, when I'm dead, and the holy sacrifice of the Mass is offered for my redemption? What difference does it make? And I worry sometimes that a lot of people can't answer that question. It's the supernatural life. God has called us into a new way of being through baptism. Faith, yes, we heard earlier on, faith grows through hearing, St. Paul says. But we receive faith because we are baptized. And in baptism, we receive the supernatural life of the theological virtues of faith, hope, and charity. It's something given to us that's not natural. It doesn't grow within us naturally. It has to be given to us by God himself. Because what we're talking about is the life of God, not my life. Now, my natural life itself is a gift given to me by God. But supernatural life is given to us directly and assuredly through baptism. I can say tonight that I believe in God, that I believe in Jesus Christ is the Savior of the world. Not because John Harris came to this great illumination by himself, but because the life of grace has been put into my soul. God in me gives me that freedom to say, I believe. It's not John Harris. It's God's gift in John Harris. That supernatural life. And I really think we need to rediscover that word in our theology and in our spirituality, the supernatural life of grace. And we need to see Mary as the mother of the supernatural life. Now, earlier on tonight, we were talking about the handbook. And just to prove, I have my handbook here. But a book I absolutely go back to time and time again, which I think is a complete jewel of Frank Duff's writing, is this little book, The De Montfort Way. To me, the De Montfort Way opened up to me the spirituality of the Legion, because it opens up the spirituality of de Montfort, who was a third order Dominican, by the way. So I'd like to read a little bit from here, from this, the De Montfort Way, page 22 and the following. He talks about Mary and her role in the church, and the church as the mystical body. But then Frank Duff says, if we seek to supplement that image by another, which will help us to appreciate the intimacy of the relations of Mary and her children, we have an expressive, though still inadequate one, in the life of the unborn babe. That babe is the soul, and its mother is Mary. And he goes on to quote St. Augustine. All the predestinate, in order to be conformed to the image of the Son of God, are in this world hidden in the womb of the Most Holy Virgin, where they are guarded, nourished, brought up, and made to grow by that good mother, until she has brought them forth to glory after death, which is properly the day of their birth, as the Church calls the death of the just. Duff says, this thought forms the central principle of the true devotion. But the words are not de Montfort's. They were written by St. Augustine nearly 1600 years ago, and did not even then represent new thinking in the church. Indeed, as de Montfort says, the devotion is bound up with the very foundations of Christianity. What it is but the putting into logical and detailed practice of the Church's teaching on the mystical body. Bear with me as I read Frank Duff. But why should we specify the unborn babe rather than the infant carried in the mother's arms and nourished with the natural milk? It is for this reason that the closeness of the relation between the soul and Mary, which de Montfort with the Church depicts, would not at all be sufficiently shown by a babe in the arms. The latter is dependent on the mother to a very large extent, but not entirely. It can and does live a little life of its own apart from its mother. It does not draw from her the air it breathes, and the portions of its nourishment, all perhaps in certain circumstances, may be gained otherwise than from its mother. And that mother may go away, or that mother may die, and yet the baby life goes on in complete independence of her, and conceivably it may fare better without than with that mother. But how different is the case with regard to the soul? From the day when the soul is born again in baptism, supernatural life, on to life's end, perhaps 100 years later, no single grace will have reached that soul without Mary. Devotedly, she carries on her mother's work of sanctification. She receives the divine graces, and like life's blood, she gives them to the soul. Of that blood, not the very least drop, that is to say, not the smallest grace, comes to us of the mystical body, otherwise than through the heart of Mary. What a picture of all-embracing dependence. The babe owes everything, absolutely everything under God, to the good offices of that mother. Thus the babe unborn must be the image with which we help our minds to understand the role of Mary, the mother of divine grace. He goes on then. But I think that little passage in the de Montfort way helps you and me to realize our utter dependence of Mary, mediatrix of all graces. The new life, the supernatural life, the life that comes directly from God and brings us into a higher level of relationship with God. Because it's all about relationships fundamentally, isn't it? When God ceases just to become a creator and I am a creature, in the divine life of grace, God is my Father. Jesus is my brother. The Holy Spirit is the breath I breathe. Mary is truly my mother, not in any romantic neo-Victorian way, but theologically true. And I call God Abba. I am the beloved child of God. The supernatural life of grace. And the whole life of the church, everything the church is about, should be allowing the supernatural life of grace to grow in the soul. We had much discussions, what shops, what services were essential during the lockdown. There is no more essential service to the soul than the sacramental life of grace. To be denied the Blessed Eucharist for 15 weeks, for babies to be denied baptism, gets me to question, do we really believe in the distinction between the natural life and the supernatural life? And I love this image of Mary and us in the womb that Duff talks about and brings us from the Montfort and St. Augustine. It makes us remember our utter dependence on Mary. Not simply on utter dependence on Mary's yes at the moment of the Annunciation. But as Father told us earlier on this evening, the yes is a continuous yes of Mary. And what Emmanuel depicted to us so beautifully tonight when he was talking about the mothers in the school. You don't stop being a mother, ever. You always worry about your children. You always care for them. The mother never stops not sleeping, worrying about her children. For us who believe in Mary as the mediatrix of all graces, this is even a much more profound reality. The very supernatural life of grace. That you and I tonight can be here together and say that God is our Father. And that you and I are trying to grow in what does it mean to be the beloved child of God? All of that is radically dependent on Mary as our mother. And so, brothers and sisters, if we talk about zeal and the mission of the Legion, I think if we really believed in the supernatural life of grace, and it just doesn't happen naturally. The natural life of each of us and the supernatural life of each of us, there is a distinction there. We need confession. We need forgiveness. Not ethereally out there, but through the sacraments of the church. We need the healing and being built up through the sacraments of the church. Because really, without the sacraments, the church doesn't exist, really. And so I would say to all of you legionaries, people's immortal souls depend on the work you do. You knock at that door. We see tonight how Veronica received that medal, the miraculous medal, and how her life has changed, and the supernatural life of grace begun, because that legionary, that young girl, handed her that medal, and something new was born. Something new that is being born in the womb of the church, as Mary continues to be the mother of all graces and leads us into the heart of Jesus. And so, legionaries, I would say tonight, we talk about this new, there is a new world. But the new world is a supernatural life of grace. That's what the church should be interested in. That's what you as legionaries should be interested in. When you go out into the street, knock at that door. And I would say one of the great gifts for being a member of the Legion of Mary is that you grow in grace. You grow in your knowledge and love of God through Mary. To Jesus through Mary is not just a nice motto. It's the way God the Father chose it to be. How God the Father chose us to receive the divine life of grace. Heaven. Your work as legionaries is about getting people to heaven, to live in the interior life of God's grace. So, brothers and sisters, thank you for tonight. My time is up, but I would like us all to think deeply on that role of Mary, the mother of the spiritual life, the mother of the supernatural life of grace that we receive through the sacraments of the church. So thank you all, if there's anybody still there.